Hey guys, Loman02. I want to show a couple 100-card singleton games, maybe actually 4 tonight. The first 2 games we'll show are for a deck that I'm actually kind of testing right now, and it's called 4-Color Zoo. In a lot of ways, it's similar to 4-Color Blood, with the exception of it's much lower to the ground, it has 0 planeswalkers, and relies completely on creatures to win the game. Playing against player Michelle Wong here, she appears to be on at least a blue base deck when I first get in, but as we'll find out shortly, it's a mono-blue deck. When I see islands, I just assume that I need to swing for the fences. So I just continue to cast my threats out, and if she wants to counter my stuff, well, that's fine, but I have the threat on the board, and I'm getting a lightning bolt in every turn. So it seems good enough to me. She plays a 3rd island, and we just continue to attack here. I'm going to run the Thalia Heretic Cathar into counter magic here. There's not much else I really can do. I mean, I can sit on it, but, I think I'd rather, if it resolves, the clock is awesome. If it doesn't, But eventually she'll get to 6 or 7 mana, and it'll become impossible for me to resolve anything else. So it's better just to, I think, thin her hand out of the counter magic. And, as you can tell here, I mean, I'm just, if she wants to counter this, that's fine. Dryad Militant is pretty good against mono blue, though. That's actually one of the white weenie adds to this deck. So the funny thing, that differences in between this deck and 4-Color Blood and this build is that this build is actually a lot more heavily white. I think it's probably 10 more white cards than green cards. Whereas I think 4-Color Blood, what makes it distinguishable is it's really, very much so a green X deck, or base Abzan deck. This deck is actually more of a base white deck, though, and how it plays out. Weather Wayfarer is a card I'm trying out. I kind of wanted to have an effect like that in the deck so that I could accrue value. So my opponent has Vidalcan Shackles, which is a very powerful card against us, but I'm not exceedingly frightened of it here, because eventually I'll just overwhelm it. This has to get countered, basically, and I'm fine with that, because the other part to throwing stuff out there to get countered is when I have an active Grim Lavamancer. Continuing to feed my fuel my graveyard with cards is going to be good for me, especially with my opponent at 9 life, and I can obviously chip in there for a little bit. She gets an attack here with the Sylvan Advocate. Just chip in there for a little bit of damage. Go ahead and search my library again. I believe find Caracas this time, just in case she has a legend or, I happen to find one. I just go ahead here and, she goes ahead and impulses. I'm not going to try to play this Butcher of the Horde out. It'll just get countered, and it's not really going to benefit me because I'll lose damage that way. And as you can see, she's kind of frantically searching for some effect to win. Wormcoil's not a bad one. But Dryad Militant's keeping her graveyard size down for dig/delve cards. And I think we're in a good spot here. She goes ahead and casts a Cryptic Command. I go ahead and dome her for 2 down to 2. She taps my stuff. At this point, I play out my creature because if she wants to counter it, great. And if she wants to take it with Vidalcan Shackles, that's fine too. She has the counter, so that's okay. At this point, she'll have Shackles up, but realistically, she has to take the Grim Lavamancer. Because if she takes anything else and I attack, she has to block it. I guess she could take Dryad Militant, but then she can't block the Withered Wayfarer, because I'm at 1 card in the graveyard, so any card going to the graveyard is going to be enough to help me win the game. I cast this thing out just for lulz, to see if she'll counter it and get her to tap out in case she has any other interaction. Plus, I also have the Caracas, she's powerful with it. She blocks. I kill her with Grim Lavamancer because blocking allowed me to do that. So, she's on 6 cards in hand, a billion lands, but the mono blue deck has a tough time dealing with, a turn 1 Jackal Pup, which is exactly, we basically killed her with. I mean, we had a turn 1 Grim Lavamancer and some other nonsense that ended up being exiled. I think Sylvan Advocate and this here Weather Wayfarer. But the deck eventually is just going to, get all that incremental damage it needs in to do the full 20, and it did. So, second game, as you can tell, some much more aggressive cards in this build. We do have Isamaru, Hound of Khanda, which is what we're going to play this first turn. I even have Destructive Revelry to answer her Shackles if she happens to have them. She unfortunately has Force Spike here, so I have to say okay to that. She plays out Jace here. I just go ahead and get rid of Jace. I don't think it's worth casting out the Ooze there to get nothing, but then I'm kind of punished and I draw Fiery Justice, which would have dealt with the Jace pretty well. At a cost of 2 life, that's fine. I start exiling cards from her graveyard. I don't see a need to grow the Ooze yet out of my own cards, my Isamaru in graveyard. I think it's better to keep her delve count down. She goes ahead and counters this. I say okay. I could have also exiled the Ooze here or the Isamaru here at her end step, but I still go to just reduce her graveyard size. I do go for the attack here, and I believe I do pump this time. No, I don't. I hold on that. I probably should have pumped there. So Wormcoil Engine comes out, and this thing is quite a beast. It's definitely a quandary we're in. I debate utilizing the Destructive Revelry there, but what I opt to do instead is attack, because I think she'll actually block the Scavenging Ooze, because I think she'll find it the most threatening card, and I blow it up during the blocker step, exile the Ooze, and allow her to have the 2/3/3s. But at this point in time, I've dealt with her 6-mana threat that is fairly unbeatable once she gets an untap, and not allowed her to gain the 6 life. So she can gain 3 on an attack here, which is going to put me under a little bit of pressure, but I think I have to accept it. I did end up going ahead and Fiery Justicing the Death Toucher out of the way. So I did 2 to her, 3 to the Death Toucher. She gained 5, so basically she gained 3. She does have the Shackles as well, which is extremely irksome, but, so this is like one of the better draws I think she can have against me. She's had a Wormcoil and Vidalcan Shackles, which is pretty potent. This turn I go ahead and I believe just play out the Butcher and don't attack. I just hang back. She does give me back my Ooze, and I figure she's probably going to take the Butcher, which is fine by me. I think Ooze is actually probably a little better than Butcher. At least in my deck, Butcher is probably better at this point, but in her deck, Butcher really doesn't do anything, because she can't sack a bunch of stuff to it to, really make it, the card that you want it to be, which is like a life-linking Vigilance Haster that also flies. She goes ahead and starts digging through her library. We start getting some Bob value here. End up going ahead and casting this Pyroblast. I figure it'll filch a counterspell out of her deck. It does. Dissipate gets cast. I do go for an attack here. I know I'm going to lose some of this stuff. I go ahead and start just knocking out some of the cards from her graveyard, again, just to hold her delve count down. And I go ahead and I believe finish off the Jace with the Arc Trail here, just to keep her out of cards and to keep my attack step decent. We get attacked here. The Tarmogoyf gets stolen with the Shackles. Draw both Knight of the Reliquary and Smuggler's Copter. Knight of the Reliquary eats an easy counter here. And she goes ahead and gives back the Tarmogoyf at this point. I figured she'd probably have to at some point, because Smuggler's Copter does beat Shackles during the combat step. Sword of Fire and Ice, not a great draw, but also not horrendous either. The fact that it resolves is quite shocking to me. I wait for her to steal one of my things, and of course, go ahead and activate the Smuggler's Copter, allowing her to have the 5/6. And I actually leave the Bob back. She's obliged to block there. Draw very well in the form of Lingering Souls. I'm getting very low on life at this point, though. I've been drawing a lot of 3-drops, despite the deck having a very low converted mana cost. Don't mind seeing Guttural Response on top. So what I'm doing here is I do activate, because the Shackles are tapped, and I just attack with the Smuggler's Copter, looking to find a land off the top. So I want to just discard this Guttural Response. I don't think it's going to be that great. I figure she's casting Pull from Tomorrows right now, or some sort of like X draw spell, like a Stroke of Genius style spell here. But I believe what it ends up being is a Delve spell. Yeah, it's to dig through time. So I end up discarding that, and I do find the land I wanted, which is cool because it allows me to re-equip the sword on something else. And I find Aether Vial on top, which is not that great. I'm sorry, it allows me to recast the other half of Lingering Soul. So I find Aether Vial on top, not great, but I can also get rid of it with Smuggler's Copter. Gaddock Teak's pretty sweet. And she goes ahead and steals my Courser, which I tap to turn on the Smuggler's Copter. So again, Smuggler's Copter is just a busted card. Like, this is an interaction you generally would not see unless you're playing like Vintage or like Legacy Legacy Cube. But Smuggler's Copter actually is like pretty broken in the fact that like it just stops Shackles if it's used like this. If Shackles gets like one big threat that just beats every other threat, then it's still going to be good. But if you have just a bunch of nonsense threats like I do, Generally speaking, you want to take them during the combat step, or the beginning of combat step, so you can block with something and trade 2 of them and then untap it on your next turn to do the same thing again. But when you have equipment in play, vehicles in play, it often renders that line of play with Shackles moot. So that was the first game. This 4-color Zoo deck versus Mono Blue. The second series of games is against a completely different style of deck. We're playing in Selesnya Pod, I want to say, or maybe it's Abzan Pod. So Junk Pod. I think it's a combo Junk Pod list. So this first hand looks good. I have a Duress, I have a Burst Lightning, I have Grim Lavamancer against creature decks, and then I have this Courser to gain card advantage against midrange or control. So in the dark, I think it's good. So I go ahead and Burst Lightning the Yshvana Shaman. I think it's the most dangerous card he has. If you wanted to stop that, I could have fetched for red mana and blown it up again and forced him to sack another land. Plays on a Viscera Seer, which is what makes me think, hey, he's on the same thing with a Sylvan Safekeeper. He's definitely on a combo-style Abzan Pod deck, so he's probably got like the Malira combo in there or something like that. This deck has no combos that I'm playing. Well, I guess if you want to consider just good card quality combos, then perhaps it does, but my opponent does have Pod here, which I know they top-decked because I duress them for 0 cards out of hand. Here, I go ahead and blow up the Sylvan Safekeeper. I Demonic Tutor for Destructive Revelry and just attack. I don't think I need to get the sword down. Here, I know their hand has 2 4-drops in it, so unless they draw a 1 or a 2-drop, they're not going to get to Pod, so I think that was the right line of play, is to go for destroying the Pod. At this point, they cast a Feldahar Guardian. So I know their hand is X plus a Palace Jailer. So they're obviously all in on a bunch of different kinds of combos, which is fine by me, because generally speaking, like, the combo-based creature cards are not as good as just like the solid, good creature cards. When you get the combo, you win, but if you don't get it, then you obviously have less time to get it because your creature quality is just lower. We see Worldly Tutor, which also belies that they're on some sort of combo-based pod deck list. But what they cast here, I believe, is just a Siege Rhinoceros, which I believe puts them back up to... I'm sorry. They tap City of Brass, so I can just tap the Grim Lavamancer at this point, and before... the Siege Rhino's on the stack. They're going to die, because they'll take lightning bolt damage off of City of Brass plus Grim Lavamancer. So that is the end of Game 1 in this match. My guess is, however, that Worldly Tutor was probably not generally designed to go get Siege Rhino in that deck. This hand is a little more marginal. Wasteland is one of the tougher cards to have in the early game with this deck because it's so mana intensive, what it requires. That was a good pickup there, though. I go ahead and just play out my Sylvan Advocate just to get some blockers down. My opponent, I believe, cast an Eldritch Evolution here, and I believe finds just a Murderous Redcap to dome me for 2. So they're going very aggressive. I just block here. Because I could do 2 things. I could actually use this Unearth right here and then also get the Bitter Blossom down. And the Sylvan Advocate does block out the Murderous Redcap at a minimum. I actually tap down for the Bloodbraid Elf. I go ahead and put a +1/+1 counter on this, plus kill the Sack Outlet. I think the Sack Outlet is actually more relevant than the Murderous Redcap is. Or rather, the 2 of them on the board at the same time is dangerous. Alright, so we get Siege Rhino'd here. Go ahead and blow up the black mana. Could be right, could be wrong. I go ahead and resolve the Butcher of the Horde. And I hang back at this point. And a Kasali Pride Mage comes down, which is a little annoying because it puts the Siege Rhino to 6 toughness, which means or 6 toughness and 6 power, or 5 power. In actuality, I probably should have double blocked it with the Bloodbraid Elf and the Sylvan Advocate. I do get some lifelink action here, but I'm at a pretty low life. My opponent has another Tutor here, which is probably going to be an issue for us. Yeah, they get a Mirran Crusader. I have kind of drawn a lot of lands this game, and Mirran Crusader is not a card that's impossible for me to beat. They accidentally send in here with the Siege Rhino. The Siege Rhino does not get through a Sylvan Advocate on 6 lands, so that's a thing. and they just dump the rest of their hand. Fiery Justice is a card, but it's not going to keep me alive against the Mirran Crusader. I don't really have Ounce here because I need to both. I mean, I suppose I could prolong the game by putting the Sylvan Advocate on like the Core Firewalker and the Butcher of Butcher of the Horde on Murderous Redcap, and sacking the Sylvan Advocate in response or before damage goes on stack to get lifelink. No, that still doesn't work because the first strike damage from double strike would still kill me. So I can't block this thing, I can't kill it, so I lose to it. But the game possibly could have been different if I'd blocked earlier. I blocked the Siege Rhino. But the issue I foresee with that is that I'm not going to get lifelink at that point. I know I'm going to lose at least one resource, and I'm not going to get lifelink with it. So, I don't know. I think it's better to do the damage plus get the lifelink off the damage. That could be wrong, though. I don't know. Yeah, maybe that was wrong. Alright, Voice of Resurgence comes down. At this point, I get down the Anafenza, which solidly beats Voice of Resurgence. Anafenza is a card that if you can play her, she hoses a lot of different strategies. One, she's just huge. So she's a good card, I mean, and she just destroys kind of like some of these aristocrat-style cards. My opponent just continues to play out like small, little tiny creatures, but doesn't look like they have a high payoff hand. I do go ahead and put +1/+1 counter on the Weathered Wayfarer here, so anything that gets blocked is going to trade with anything she has. Put her down to 8, so she's a very low life total at this point, and probably has to start blocking. Takes 2 more off of the fetch land, Eldritch Evolutions into a Siege Rhinoceros to kind of turn the tide a bit for her. At this point, I make a gamble here. I play the land out main 1 in hopes that he will try to play around something that I don't have. And I put a +1/+1 counter around the Goblin Guide. He actually blocks the Goblin Guide here and allows the Anafenza to get through, which is technically wrong. I could see you want to be playing around like stuff like Arc Trail or something like that, but that was a big turn for us as far as our bluff. But our bluff did pay off there. And we draw into a Siege Rhinoceros, which, you know, due to the more aggressive line we took earlier, is going to allow us to win now because we've chipped in there with damage. It's a very lucky draw, but at the same time, we run a lot of burn in the deck. We run a lot of direct damage in the deck, you know, Tribal Flame, stuff like that. And, you know, we run some of the best aggressive and evasive creatures. So, you know, Zoo was able to get there in this 3-game match set. We played one more against Red Tour, and I believe in this one we actually played Blue-White Control, which is probably one of my, well, it's up there on my favorites to play. This hand is barely keepable, but in the dark, I'm not going to pretend, I'm not going to act like I know what he's going to play, because he's probably going to play the same thing. But I think, you know, knowing what he's playing, I probably wouldn't have kept that hand because it doesn't have white mana, or the ability to cast a Wrath of God off the top. But I keep it in the dark. Spike Feeder again. He doesn't have a land, it appears, so the Force Spike actually sticks. I have to search for his Kanta here and hope that I can start top-depping some lands, because my 2-land keep with the extra draw off of Remand is not panned out. I do keep the island despite really wanting a Plains there. I go ahead and just filter my draw by getting a Snapcaster, so I'm not going to draw it next turn, and I can also Force Spike something, and/or once I get more mana, Remand something. Not that it's an extremely strong play against Voice of Resurgence, but I do think it's actually not horrendous against Voice of Resurgence either, because it allows you to block it and just get it out of the way so you can actually counter things. I'll go ahead and Swords to Plowshares it here, because I do hit the plains that I so direly wanted. Gaia's Cradle comes down, and we're in big trouble at this point. Woodland Bellower, opponents at 0 cards. I believe they find an Eternal Witness getting back the Spike Feeder. I think Reclamation Sage would have been more correct, though. So we're pretty sure we're dead here. I actually do keep that. It may have been wrong. Maybe I should have just gone for Terminus, which is in the deck. I go ahead and just get rid of the Bellower because it's huge. If the Detention Sphere gets blown up, you know, oh well. I'm already losing this game, so I'm kind of going for broke just to buy another turn here, but I think I'm already dead to this attack. Yeah, we are dead to this attack. So we go to 0 life. Too bad, so sad. Gaia's Cradle, you know, no one ever said it was a fair card. So, Game 2. This hand I'm a lot happier with in this matchup, due to the fact that it has the white mana it wants, it has some early interaction, and Vidalcan Shackles is very good. So, the plan here is we have Maze of Ith, and we have these Shackles, and our opponent is obviously constrained on mana. Vizier of Remedies lets me know that they're in on a couple, like even more combos. So they are likely running cards like Devoted Druid in their deck. Back to Basics normally would be pretty good, but is pretty horrible right here because my opponent has 3 mana dorks, and I have like a lot of non-basics, which is a rarity for the deck, but sometimes the draws line up that way. Eternal Witness resolves. Believe Gish gets back the Vizier of Remedies, so my assumption is they probably have another way to find or either have the Devoted Druid. They accidentally give me all these cards, which is a pretty big misplay, but I'm going to take it. I opt, find land on top, go ahead and continue to develop my mana resources, and the Enlightened Tutor can get a couple things here. Since I already have Back to Basics, what I opt to do, as opposed to going for like Moat, is to get the Engineered Explosives to wreck their mana situation. I figure that does more work for me. It takes away 3 mana. It's a 3-for-1, and it gets rid of 3 mana on their side, which seems pretty good. Yeah, my Jace is going to be in a little bit more of a dubious place. Here I think they're probably casting Court of Calling, but I've left up Flash Freeze. It's actually just Restoration Angel, which is kind of a beating, but we'll be alright. I believe they actually get back the Worldly Tutor here, as opposed to a land. So, they make another misplay here. They should have sent more than one creature at Jace, Architect of Thought, because he would have died. So they do have the Devoted Druid they found with their Worldly Tutor, so I'm not going to allow them to have infinite mana with that, plus Vizier. I go ahead and just blow up the Restoration Angel and with the Gideon, and then shrink everything else with Jace for on attack steps. Maze, Jace goes back down to 1. Alright, so I finally lose the Jace here to a Walking Ballista, but at this point I feel confident to drop the Hammer with Back to Basics, and I think that'll allow me to probably win the game. Yeah, because I'm going to get to Dig Through Time as well. Like, these creature cards are going to do a little bit of damage, and yeah, my Maze is now permanently tapped, but they go ahead and concede when they see they have a blocker for their last creature card, and I'm getting an opt. I still have Dig Through Time in hand. I still have Dissolve in hand. Like, this game's probably locked up with back to Basics there. So, interesting game. The Tutor package, obviously very strong. Enlightened Tutor for the Engineered Explosives, probably the game-winning play in that game. This hand is very landed. It could go nowhere, but it has some very powerful cards in the form of Search for Iskanta, and it's got all these cantrips now. Search down early. My opponent has an extremely fast start again, like they did in the first game, with just a bunch of little tiny critters. They play on a Bazooka Bog for no value. Selfless Spirit means that I cannot Wrath of God them. They actually utilize their Recruiter of the Guard to find that, which I tend to be okay with. So they're obviously casting numerous spells this turn. Cast a Finks out, but what I'm really looking for is like Personal Tutor and Enlightened Tutor to find Terminus. So I'm in a lot of trouble here. I gotta find a way to stay alive. I do get a Tundra here because I want to get 2 islands with the Myriad Landscape, and I would like to resolve. I like to have the option to resolve the Gideon Jura next turn because my opponent has been just casting more spells on as opposed to using their dorks to attack me. My thinking is like, hey, I could probably just Mystic Confluence the highest power creatures next turn to buy some tempo and draw into an additional card and just see if I can find something relevant before I just pitch the Gideon out there. Because if I can resolve the Gideon and keep the Gideon alive, then that would be great. I ditch the Mana Drain. Don't need permission right now. I go ahead and scry here. Find Vidalcan Shackles, which is not bad, but I'm not going to be able to use that to keep myself alive this next turn. I go ahead and tell everything to attack the Gideon. I find Entreat, plus a card I put on the bottom. So I'm going to get to Entreat for 5 Angels next turn, which should be able to allow me to turn the tide here. Gideon's long dead, so he did what he's supposed to do and bought me a turn. And here we were able to make, I believe, 25 power, or correction, 20 power in Angels on our draw step. Play on our land and say go. Opponent plays out an Avid Mind Sensor, which is A-okay with me. So we're going to take 3 damage here, essentially. because my opponent will sacrifice the Selfless Spirit just to keep some of their critters around. I finally draw into the Wrath, but now that I've committed the Angels, I kind of feel like I'd rather just keep them in play. Opponent's 21 life, so even if I all on attack there, they just go to 1 and I don't have burn in this deck. I do steal the Abzan, so they don't have any flying blockers. And the key to this next turn is going to be blocking. Just blocking. I mean, we're just going to attack and win. Just don't block the Abzan Mind Sensor on the Kitchen Finks, and we should win because we need the extra 2 power off of this to win. So this would take him up to 23 life, and we would attack for 20 plus 2. Actually, no. So we need to let the Finks through. So it's crucial that we let the Finks through, actually, I think. I mean, I don't think he's playing Giant Growth in his deck, but yeah. So that was that game. And then the last one we have against Redditori, we're actually playing Grixis, which is a deck near and dear to my heart, but it's also against this Azorius, this Abzan pod deck. Abzan pod decks are pretty cool, so like his deck I think is somewhere in the proximity of like what the Canadian Highlander community would call the Sandra Bullock deck or the Sandy B deck. I like to call Pattern Rector. I think that's what the Germans call it. But it has a lot more combos in it than a typical Pattern Rector deck would. Normally, Pattern Rector is just kind of has a few less because some of the combo cards are just really dead. Then it's got this weird kind of like Maverick sub theme kind of going on. So it's an interesting deck. I think it's a little bit. It lacks a little bit of coherence though. I have Force Spike here, so I'm gonna try to take the opportunity to play out the Creeping Tar Pit. When I see my opponent not attack with the Arbor Elves, I figure they're going all in on a 4-drop because you wouldn't leave Arbor Elves back if you didn't need to. I don't think you'd leave Arbor Elves back from an attack if you thought you had to pay for Force Spike. I mean, like, or if you're trying to play around Force Spike, yes, you would. But generally speaking, I don't think folks are going to play around it that hard. Take 2 here. I debate cycling my Miscalc. I don't. I just keep it. Now I have Cryptic Command, which is great. I actually do Cryptic Command this because I figure it's going to get Gaia's Cradle, and I figure they have a 6-drop in hand, and I figure if I counter this, like if they have a Woodland Bellower, I could just Thoughtseize it next turn, and possibly like leave up Force of Will, or I could just leave up Force of Will. What I opt to do is just leave up Force of Will here. I'm not uncomfortable taking 2 damage a turn. They actually finally stop attacking because they realize I can activate the Creeping Tar Pit. I do Thoughtseize here, though. And see a Protean Hulk plus another card that's not really that relevant. Protean Hulk is their combo card. Really, Protean Hulk's not the combo that wins in this deck, though. It's Malira plus some other creature, plus like the Vizier and like the Kitchen Finks and a Sack Outlet. So the top of my deck's great. Like I've been hitting a lot of lands here, but the top deck I cannot complain about here. It's possible I wanted to just burn off this Brainstorm on end step here. I kind of wanted to let the game develop a little bit. I do counter this with the Force of Will. That may seem like a waste of Force of Will, but the last card in their hand is nothing special. They can't cast it this turn, and that will protect their creature cards from any mass removal. Not that I have a ton of mass removal in the deck, and most of it would get around that anyways. I do go for a TC here. Draw into some decent cards to include this thing in the ice. Opponent plays out another part of the combo, but these combo pieces don't attack very well, so like I'm not too worried. They should have attacked there, though, to try to get in 2 damage. I would have blocked the Malira. And now they're kind of out of the game because I have an additional Delve card. I have Factor Fiction, which I'm going to do on their end step here. They're going to give me all lands or all spells. Well, at this point, I don't really need more lands. I have tons of them, and I'll just keep all spells. I go ahead and dig through time here to draw into more nonsense. I actually take Firebolt and Vendilion Click. I think Vendilion Click is decent with Thing in the Ice. So I end up doing this all on their upkeep, so it keeps them from seeing an additional draw, and they sack all their critters. I'm going to bounce them anyways here. I didn't feel like I needed to get the damage in. I figured I would just either tie up their mana in their upkeep or during their next turn, so I can just get this Awoken Horror down and start smashing face. With them on 4 cards, one of which we know, the other's probably not as good, and us on this vast of a mana advantage plus 9 cards in hand. They go ahead and pack it in because it's probably a foregone conclusion who's going to win from this position. regardless of an early aggressive life swing that they took against us. That hand was interesting but not keepable. So this hand's fine. I can either him to turn 2, or I can take the time to resolve the Young Pyromancer. I have to go for the Pyromancer here. If my opponent has like the infinite mana combo on turn 2, like I'll accept that. I do go for the him here because they've unfortunately mulliganed, I believe, down to 4 or 5, and we get the rest of their hand here, and I get a free 1/1, which seems great. And yeah, they go ahead and pack it in there. This hand, regardless, I think was going to be really good against a creature-based Abzan deck. Gurmag's huge. Collective Brutality's nice. Liliana, Lightning Bolt, like the hand's just stellar. So, guys, this is a series of 4 games. I really wanted to take the time to highlight the first of the decks in there, which was 4-color Zoo, which I believe should be up here somewhere. We can take a look at it real fast. It's kind of similar to 4-color Blood, with the exception of it basically plays more in tune with like a white weenie list. You can see it's 31 white sources in the deck to a 26 green sources. So the deck plays a lot more like a white attack deck, except it has a lot more interaction. Another way I think you could take like 4 or even like domain zoos / domain attack decks is humans. I think the modern deck could be used as inspiration to build a humans list. I've built one. I don't think it's the right list. I think I built it really hastily, and like it has like 1 non-creature spell plus lands in it. I think it has an Aether Vial just to fix the mana. But the deck works really well. It attacks very well, and it's got some decent disruption. The problem is it doesn't have the best disruption. Like this deck has better disruption than that deck does, despite having probably less synergistic creatures at a trade-off for better independent creatures. So, this is the 4-color Zoo list. I won't go through the Grixis list. You've seen that before. I think you've seen my my blue-white splash black miracles list. All very fun lists, and I hope you guys enjoyed the games. And take care now.